FIFA just changed the rhythm of a football match and almost nobody noticed what they actually did. On the surface, it looks like care. It looks like science. It looks like the sport finally catching up with the human body. But underneath the bottles of water and the wet towels and the carefully worded medical statements, something else is happening at the 2026 World Cup. Something that is reshaping how the game is played, how it is sold, how it is watched, and who profits when the whistle blows for a pause. Players are confused, coaches are quietly delighted, broadcasters are counting, and fans are furious. Stick with me, because once you see how this rule actually works, you will never watch a World Cup match the same way again. The rule itself is simple enough on paper. At the 2026 FIFA World Cup, every single match now includes mandatory hydration breaks, scheduled into both halves, applied universally, regardless of weather, regardless of venue, regardless of the score. This is not the old cooling break, the one introduced years ago for matches played above a certain wet bulb temperature, triggered only when conditions became dangerous. This is something new. This is a fixed, locked, non-negotiable pause built into the structure of every 90 minutes of football the tournament produces. The stated reason is player welfare. The justification, delivered through medical advisors and tournament officials, is that with a competition stretched across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, with kickoff times scattered across climate zones, with humidity in Miami and altitude in Mexico City and heat in Dallas, the only way to protect athletes consistently is to stop guessing and start scheduling. So FIFA stopped guessing. They scheduled it. And here's the part that complicates everything, because on paper, it's working. The medical community broadly is supportive. Sports scientists have spent years warning that elite footballers at a World Cup are pushed into a physiological zone that no club season prepares them for. The fixtures come faster. The travel is longer. The pressure is heavier. Hydration loss in a single half can climb into figures that would alarm any physician, and the cumulative dehydration across a tournament has been linked to muscle injuries, cognitive lapses, and the kind of late-game collapses that decide knockout ties. The argument from the medical side is straightforward. If you wait until a player is visibly struggling, you have already waited too long. The pitch is a good one. Protect the asset, protect the athlete, protect the spectacle. And in a tournament being played in some of the most punishing summer conditions in recent World Cup history, the case writes itself. Even some of the players have nodded along. The Netherlands captain Virgil van Dijk asked about the breaks, framed them as something a modern professional simply absorbs into the rhythm of the match. Youri Tielemans of Belgium spoke about them as a chance to reset, to think, to listen. The official narrative held: player welfare, common sense, modern football catching up with modern science. But here's where it gets dangerous. Because a hydration break is not just a hydration break, it is a stoppage. It is a structured, protected, broadcast-friendly pause inside a sport that, for over a century, defined itself by its refusal to stop. Football's identity, the thing that separated it from every American sport, from basketball, from tennis, from cricket, was the unbroken flow of 2 45-minute halves. No timeouts, no commercial windows inside the play, no coaches pulling players to the sideline to draw on whiteboards. The clock ran, the game breathed, and whatever happened, happened inside that breathing. FIFA has now punctured that, and the people who understand exactly what has been punctured are not the medical staff. They are the coaches. Think about what that actually means. A head coach at a World Cup, under the old rules, had 90 minutes to communicate with his players through gestures, through substitutions, through the 15-minute window of halftime. That was it. Tactical adjustments had to be screamed across a touchline or held until the interval. Now, twice per match, sometimes more, a coach gets a sanctioned, scheduled, FIFA-approved window to gather his squad, deliver instructions, change shape, reset pressing triggers, and reorient an entire game plan. This is not hydration. This is a tactical timeout. And coaches who would never publicly campaign for such a thing because it would contradict football's traditional self-image are quietly, privately, almost gratefully embracing it. The pause that was sold as medicine is being used as strategy, and here is where things change completely. Because once you understand that the breaks are functioning as tactical timeouts, you have to ask the next question: who else benefits? Who else has been waiting for football to finally open a door it had kept locked for a century? The answer is sitting in the control rooms of every major broadcaster carrying the 2026 World Cup. The answer is sitting in the sales departments of every network that paid eye-watering sums for the rights to this tournament? The answer is sitting in the inventory spreadsheets of media buyers who, for decades, have looked at football and seen the one global sport they could not slice into commercial windows the way they slice the NFL, the NBA, or Major League Baseball. A hydration break is, functionally, a commercial break. It is a scheduled pause, predictable in timing, long enough to cut to a sponsor, short enough not to lose the audience. Multiply that by every match of a tournament that now features more games than any World Cup in history, across a host structure spanning 3 countries, and the volume of new commercial inventory created by this single rule change is not measured in minutes. It is measured in hours. Hours of premium, World Cup branded, captive audience advertising time that did not exist 18 months ago. Hours that someone is selling. Hours that someone is buying. Hours that the official justification, the player welfare justification, never once mentioned. And the wildest part, FIFA has not had to argue for any of this. They did not have to lobby broadcasters. They did not have to negotiate with sponsors. They simply rewrote the rhythm of the match and let the money find its own way in. Here is the bigger issue, because if you listen carefully to the way this rule was introduced, you hear a familiar pattern. The language is medical, the framing is protective, the optics are humane, and buried underneath all of it is a commercial reality that nobody at the top of the sport is willing to address directly. The pattern is not new. It is the same pattern that brought expanded squads sold as welfare and delivered more shirt sales. The same pattern that brought longer tournaments sold as opportunity and delivered more fixtures to broadcast. The same pattern that brought VAR sold as fairness and delivered longer broadcasts with more advertising windows around every review. Every single one of these changes arrived wrapped in the language of care and left behind a financial structure that benefits the institution far more than it benefits the athletes it claimed to protect. Player welfare, player welfare, player welfare. The phrase has been repeated so many times across so many FIFA press conferences that it has begun to function less as a value and more as a shield. Player welfare when the calendar expands. Player welfare when the tournament grows from 32 to 48 teams. Player welfare when the matches multiply and the travel stretches and the recovery windows shrink. And now, player welfare when the game itself is paused, twice per half, in a way that just happens to align perfectly with the commercial appetite of every broadcaster on the planet. At some point, the phrase stops being a justification and starts being an indictment. And the human cost of that indictment is not abstract. Ask the players who have spent years complaining about fixture congestion, only to be told the solution is more fixtures. Ask the coaches who watched the international calendar swell while their preparation time shrank. Ask the supporters who paid for tickets to watch 90 minutes of football and found themselves staring at a stationary pitch while sponsors flashed across stadium screens. The people closest to the sport have been telling FIFA in increasingly direct language that something is breaking, and the response has been consistently to add another layer of structure, another scheduled pause, another carefully branded innovation, and to call it progress. Now here is where the pattern becomes undeniable. Consider what has happened at this World Cup alone. The hydration breaks, sold as medical necessity, functioning as tactical timeouts and commercial windows, alongside expanded VAR reviews that stretch stoppage time into territory unrecognizable from previous tournaments, alongside an expanded group stage that has added matches of questionable competitive value but enormous broadcast value, alongside kickoff times scheduled not for the comfort of players or local fans, but for the primetime slots of distant television markets, alongside stadium experiences increasingly designed around corporate hospitality rather than the supporters who travel thousands of miles to be there. The pattern across all of these decisions is the same. Every single one has a public justification rooted in the language of improvement, and every single one has a private consequence rooted in the language of revenue. This is not a single coordinated conspiracy. It is something more troubling than that. It is multiple departments, multiple committees, multiple stakeholders, all reaching the same conclusion through different processes, because the institutional incentives all point in the same direction. When every decision-making body inside an organization is rewarded for growing commercial output, every decision they make will eventually grow commercial output. The hydration breaks are not the cause of this. They are the symptom. They are the latest piece of evidence in a much longer pattern of football slowly, methodically being reshaped around the needs of everyone except the people who play it and the people who watch it And the fans, the actual fans, the ones who built this sport into the global cultural force it became, are the ones being asked to absorb the cost. They are the ones watching matches stretch from 90 minutes into something closer to 120. They are the ones watching the rhythm they fell in love with get carved into segments. They are the ones being told, in the polite language of institutional communication, that this is for everyone's benefit, while every visible piece of evidence suggests the benefit is flowing in one direction only. It is about control. It is about who owns the rhythm of the match. It is about whether football, the last major global sport to resist the American model of timeouts and commercial windows, can hold the line on what made it different. And the answer, written across every minute of the 2026 World Cup, appears to be that the line has already moved. The only question now is how much further it will move before someone with the authority to stop it actually does. Cast your mind back to the way this was sold. A simple medical measure, a modern response to modern conditions, a protective gesture from a governing body that cares about its athletes. Then look at what it has become. A tactical instrument for coaches, a commercial gift to broadcasters, a structural change to the flow of the world's most watched sporting event, all introduced under a single justification that, the more you examine it, the less it explains. Player welfare. The phrase keeps returning because FIFA keeps returning to it. Player welfare when the schedule expands. Player welfare when the breaks multiply. Player welfare when the advertising inventory grows. If player welfare were truly the driving concern, the conversation would begin with the calendar, with the travel, with the recovery windows, with the brutal sequence of club and country commitments that has top players speaking openly about burnout. It would not begin, and it would certainly not end, with bottles of water passed across a touchline twice per half. What this reveals is the gap between what football says about itself and what football is becoming. The institutions speak the language of tradition while dismantling tradition piece by piece. They speak the language of the supporter while pricing the supporter out of the stadium. They speak the language of the player while stretching the player across a calendar designed for revenue rather than performance. And every time a new rule arrives, wrapped in the soft vocabulary of care, the underlying machinery of the sport tilts a little further toward the people who were already winning. The evidence suggests this is not an accident. The pattern shows it is not isolated. And what this reveals, when you line up the hydration breaks alongside everything else this tournament has quietly introduced, is that football's governing body has discovered something powerful. They have discovered that almost any change can be sold, almost any rhythm can be rewritten, almost any tradition can be edited, as long as the press release uses the right words. So next time you are watching a World Cup match and the referee blows the whistle for what you have been told is a hydration break, look at the touchline. Watch the coach gather his players. Watch the tactical instructions being delivered. Watch the broadcast cut to a sponsor. Watch the rhythm of the game you grew up loving get carved gently and professionally into a shape designed by people who have never kicked a ball at this level. And then ask yourself whether what you are watching is really about water. Football has always lived and died in its rhythm. The unbroken flow, the 90 minutes that refused to stop for anyone. That was not a technical detail. That was the soul of the thing. And the soul of the thing is now being negotiated, quietly, in rooms most fans will never see, by people who have learned that the most effective way to change a sport is not to announce the change loudly, but to introduce it gently, justify it medically, and let the consequences settle in before anyone realizes what has been traded away. So what do you think? You have followed this sport long enough to know the difference between a genuine welfare measure and a commercial maneuver dressed in medical language. Does this feel like protection, or does it feel like the next step in a much longer pattern? Are the hydration breaks at the 2026 World Cup really about the players on the pitch or about the inventory in the broadcast booth? And if they are about both, which side is actually winning? If you found this worth your time, a like genuinely helps more than you would think. Subscribe if you enjoy thoughtful football coverage that goes beyond the headlines, and let me know your view in the comments. I read every single one, and the best conversations on this channel always start there.